Good morning, everyone, and a massive thank you to everybody brave enough to join us on revisiting a year so crazy that they named it twice, 2020, if you didn't get that. Your guides today are going to be me, Josh McGregor, Head of Marketing here at Salesfire, but I'd also like to introduce Calum Ridley, our marketing strategist. He's the keeper of our stat platform, TrendDesk, and also, according to his bio, a lover of all things analytical.
Thank you very much, Josh, for that glowing introduction. Let me take you straight into the agenda for what we're going to be discussing. We're going to try and take on a bit of a chronological structure and delve really into the metrics that best reflect the trends that defined such a crazy year. As society changed its behavior, we're going to follow the immediate impacts this had on commerce, and from sales data to online behaviors, we've analysed over 3 million data points to provide you with the most complete view into what actually happened in 2020 and how we can even use that to succeed in 2021. So as a term that has been around all year, 2020 provided a new normal in many walks of life, and pardon the pun, e-commerce was not immune to that. We analysed the new behaviours that will accelerate in 2021 and the responses that we're advising our clients to adopt right now. Well, 2020, an unforgettable year for e-commerce, a forgettable year for just about everything else. 2020 was fascinating, and it was an incredible year for e-commerce, and dependencies of online transactions were given monumental boosts by the kind of government-ordered lockdowns. Outside of e-commerce, 2020 was a year many people will quickly want to forget, but there is light at the end of the tunnel now, and there's a hell of a lot we can learn from an otherwise particularly somber year. I'll shortly dive headfirst into the analysis, but first let us clarify who we are and why we are able to analyze the deep reaches of commerce.
So I'll start by giving you a brief rundown on Salesfire. Basically, Salesfire was born out of a group of people with years and years of experience working within e-commerce, more specifically e-commerce platforming. And the biggest thing that they've taken away from that being that a lot of clients will get there, they'll get their platform set up, but they'll ignore some key touch points in a customer's journey. And that's something that customers are coming to expect is addressed more and more nowadays. So every day we're putting everything we have into trying to revolutionize the way people are shopping. But more importantly, us and especially our clients, is we're more interested in how customers are being inspired to shop and how they're being inspired to make those purchases. We're trying to create a space in a website stack that's really smooth integration when it comes to the product. It's easy to use and really strongly addresses those gaps. We're trying to make websites more profitable, and we've designed a suite of products that have at this point statistically proven to improve those revenues, those conversions, and those retention rates. Whether it's building search capabilities, we're founded on super fast results and image compatibility, or product recommendation campaigns predicting purchase behavior. Our product portfolio is used to facilitate millions of transactions every month, over 1 billion a year at this point, I think. And I'll hand this over to Calum to run through TrendDesk, our stat platform, and what we're basing these stats on today.
Yeah, so if Salesfire is kind of the front-end optimization tools, what TrendDesk is the analytical engine that powers those optimization tools that we provide to those Salesfire clients. We sit on the back end of our client operations and kind of meticulously tracking behaviors and understanding how websites are performing commercially. By then having a view into tens of thousands of e-commerce brands within the UK, we are constantly analysing industry trends and know more about consumer behaviours before the consumers do themselves. We are then enriching our client optimization strategies by making the data work for them, tailored to the industry they're in.
So section 1, we're looking at March through to May. So at this point, we were just in lockdown. Things were very up in the air, and a lot of retailers didn't know which way to turn. They didn't know how things were going to pan out, how things were going to look for their businesses moving forward. So what you're seeing in front of you here is a top-line view of how e-commerce grew throughout 2020. We've highlighted some of the key events socially for your reference, but it's pretty clear to see how national lockdowns have propelled sales online and how the base level of a brand's digital sales have been largely inflated. Something we believe is almost certainly going to remain this way. Following the orders to stay indoors at the end of March, total e-commerce revenue accelerated faster than any period ever since 2006, and that is literally when ONS records began. So I'll hit you over to Calum now, where we're going to start our analysis.
Yeah, so as Josh mentioned, that was a crazy time for e-commerce and the natural place to start our analysis. So those months between March and May set the precedent for what was to come throughout 2020. Personally, here at Salesfire, we witnessed many clients' online revenues in this time period grow between 6 and 7 times in April than they had in March, which was a super crazy time to be in e-commerce and really outdoors of e-com. That was where society was really starting to adjust to a life indoors. So what we've tried to do here is understand that peak, but through the lens of different industries. And we've selected 3 industries that reflected the main changes we were facing as a nation. All of a sudden, our work, our play, and our health were all facing major alterations. From a work perspective, the office-based population were forced to turn bedrooms, kitchens, and dining rooms into desks, meeting spaces, and Zoom backgrounds. This drove massive revenue growth at the time for the home and living industry, with a massive 220% of extra revenue spent in that home and living category in the 3 months ending May.
Just in regards to trends, did we see anything particularly change at this point? Which were the key categories we really saw those trends being kickstarted in?
Yeah, well, it kickstarted a massive kind of macro trend and really people starting to view their homes as more than just living spaces. So we saw this outside of our own data with kind of DIY sales in companies like B&Q and Screwfix. They recorded hugely successful years for revenue, and the main trend is as people start to filter that money they would initially have spent within travel or entertainment, they've started to push that towards other industries like home improvements, for example.
I suppose when you mention travel, that's one that is also going to lead directly into hobbies as well, isn't it, on this next slide?
Definitely. Like hobbies was massively impacted. So the shutting down of leisure centres and social gatherings meant that much of the population took up kind of new and safe hobbies. One of the major winning industries we saw was gardening and accessories. So this industry actually saw a massive growth of 533%.
Wow.
in those 3 months. So, but it's interesting to look at that chart because we can see that although there was that massive engagement at the start, those inflated revenues didn't really sustain, and that suggests that that increased revenue, increased demand is not going to sustain kind of post lockdowns.
We can sort of see that in sports and performance, can't we, as well, with that rise there?
Yeah, definitely. That was another winning industry in those first few months, but different to gardening and accessories, we see that performance sustain throughout the year and even spike again in kind of Q4. So what we saw there was with the closure of gyms and leisure centres, many people actually flocked to those kind of sports apparel and equipment brands to supplement their health. They knew if they were going to stay inside, then they needed to do something. So we've had conversations here with those in charge of like gym brands, trying to suggest and saying that they might have to rethink their business models to suit that kind of consumer in a post-COVID world.
Change that refocus. Yeah, that's been something that we've had to deal with quite a bit, hasn't it? And that leads us directly into May and August, I suppose, when things were getting a bit more comfortable. We started having a bit more of an idea of how sort of lockdown looks. And I dare say we were sort of had eyes on how we start pulling out of it and how we start seeing life reopen, albeit in a slightly more restricted way than what we're used to.
Yeah, if we'd said that the period before, the market was very reactionary to what was going on, I think it's fair to say that the middle period between May and August was more about acceptance, and a great reflector of this is lying in average order values.
Okay.
So there were many categories that realized large growth in basket spend in this time period, and we've identified a few things that this is a combination of. So one, a greater confidence in brands to fulfill those online orders. Two, a general acceptance to lockdown, and this is how life was going to be. And three, a burning desire to make that lockdown life more pleasurable. And if we isolate health and beauty, for example, we see that an acceptance to the fact that, you know, salons and hairdressers weren't going to open anytime soon. So people not only spend on self-care, but really invest in it, really spend extra money on a pair of straighteners, for example, that are going to replicate that experience for them.
DIY
DIY haircuts, definitely. And some of them definitely looking better than others. And I'm a victim of that. But other industries like gaming and electronics saw big rises in average order values. And this revisits the trend of people rebudgeting money usually spent in entertainment and travel into things that would just make their day-to-day life more pleasurable.
Is that something we've managed to sustain looking at the numbers, or is that similar to gardening, where we saw that initial high that's amazing, but then we also saw that not really a steady, quite a strict drop?
Well, yeah, that growth has sustained throughout the year, and it's something that we think will continue into 2021 and beyond. Again, the factors of such an ease of online shopping, and because the brands are seeing this and reacting and making their online offerings much smoother, that combined with still a bit of a perceived health risk of shopping in store and bumping into people, for example, that's going to bump up those order values and basket spend. So if I'm a brand listening to this, I'm going to want to make sure that my average order values are growing in line with the industry.
Cool. So this brings us onto August, running through to October. So we were starting to get out and about a bit more, albeit quite tentatively. The more symbolic, I think, representation of this being the Eat Out to Help Out scheme that was introduced, encouraging people back out into the open in an effort to revive the hospitality industry. But how did that affect us online?
Well, Josh, here I'm going to actually move away from TrendDesk data and look at some data from the Association of Convenience Stores, which show that a drop in e-commerce spend was largely picked up by local and independent bricks and mortar. So looking at those pie charts, we can see that as the population were encouraged to venture out, sales values increased and basket spend grew within those local and independent stores as people started to show a sense of a much kind of maligned community loyalty.
This is an interesting one, because this is something we've discussed previously on podcasts and the like. Do you think this is something that's going to be of interest to people in 2021?
Well, I think it's too early to say, but it's definitely an interesting trend to follow in 2021. I think it can go two ways, really. If the vaccine is successful, we may actually see a proud return to the high street and a plateau to the immense e-com growth of 2020. So brands, it's probably good to follow those brands with a multi-channel approach to see how they're doing, because they'll benefit from being able to bring that sense of community loyalty back into their online offerings as well.
Cool. Makes sense, especially them being so niche and things like that as well. They tend to be the ones that come out the gate with the multi-channel hats on.
Yeah,
straight away.
And if we flip back to online, TrendDesk recorded a lull in in what was a year of massive growth for online conversions between August and October. So if you look at the chart there, then that's actually the only period throughout the year that we see a defined drop in online purchasing then.
Which sectors in particular do we have eyes on those?
Yeah, so the beauty of TrendDesk is that we can actually break it down by category and industry, and some of the sectors that saw the biggest drops were electronics, gardening, and home. And I think this is perhaps an indication of some of the types of products that consumers prefer to buy in store, given the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this isn't necessarily true for the clothing industry. And as you'll see, that the conversions actually grew by 31% in that time period. So there's definitely a distinction there. There's some products that consumers are quite happy to purchase online.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some products and industries that, given the opportunity to go in store, people will want to check out big ticket electronics or see plants, for example, in the gardening industry up close.
It's interesting that as well, with people being locked down, they'll be almost craving that experiential, hands-on trip to the Curry's PC World, to the Euronics Centre, that type of thing.
So it is a really interesting one to follow how e-commerce adjusts to the return of high street shopping.
It's definitely one we'll be following on TrendDesk as well, so it might be a good time to plug the newsletter. We're going to be sending out updates week on week, and we'll probably be doing comparisons back to 2020 as well.
Mm-hmm.
So October to November, we were looking to Christmas at this point, and the potential easing of the lockdown. But there's the idea there that we might be able to see some of our loved ones and spend a bit of time getting merry. But at this point, we were asking, are we actually going to end up braving the shopping centre on Christmas Eve as I do, or was I going to be doing it from an armchair?
Yeah, so when we move into kind of the last section of our timeline, we're going to focus on November, which was an extremely interesting month. Now, November is usually a high month for consumer spend, and you've got things like Black Friday and Cyber Monday accelerating that. But with another lockdown and with a kind of 4-week circuit breaker coming in effect on the 5th, then e-commerce experienced another massive boost to online sales.
And I think it's important to note that this was a completely digitally exclusive Black Friday at this point. And we've also seen another boost in another significant event that I think you'll be going into as well.
Yeah, so one extremely interesting trend that we've been monitoring throughout the inception of TrendDesk is the consistent growth of site search as a big contributor to overall site revenue. So as you can see on the chart, throughout the year, consumers' use of site search has been consistently growing. But in November, it peaked massively, and sales driven through search channels were 90% higher than they were in September. We believe that this explosion in search will see it become the primary feature in the customer journey, and we think it really needs to be exploited in 2021. And the way to do that is ensuring you have extremely fast and optimized search capability on your e-commerce platform. That's kind of the one key thing that consumers will either be turned on or turned off, will be that site speed within searches. Now, to go back to revenue and to look at November by day, we can clearly identify some interesting things that are going on within the industry. So me and Josh and I both think it's really interesting in the home and clothing industries to see that drop in sales, a massive decline the 2 days before Black Friday.
All right, it's an interesting one, isn't it? It's we've seen a lot of huge retailers over the past few years completely put their site on ice, for lack of a better term, the day before Black Friday, and just collect newsletter sign-ups and grow that mailing list rather than let you shop on the entire site, which is obviously a way of saving resource for the rush to the next day. And that obviously, again, as this data shows, people are really stopping their spending, waiting for the potential sales the next day.
Well, the data is there now to back up the kind of things that people like JD are doing, and things like marketing budget, paid media isn't really going to cut through on those 2 days before. So it's really interesting to kind of see that and understand that for next year. And then the second part of this chart, looking at clothing and accessories, is interesting to see a massive two-pronged peak within that month. So things like Black Friday and Singles Day causing massive uplifts in demand within the clothing and accessories industry. So this is something that we didn't really foresee and weren't massively prepared for at Salesfire. The massive demand that comes through the clothing industry on Singles Day.
Yeah.
And we're saying to all our clients within the sector, if this isn't on your radar, then it really needs to be. It really needs to be,
especially if you want to stay ahead of the.
But even in other industries, is Singles Day big for you? Well, perhaps the data shows that home isn't, but is there anything you can do to kind of piggyback on the demand of that event?
From a strategic perspective, definitely. Again, that's something, I know we've got quite a lot of existing clients signed up to this for us, so if you are interested in anything to do with Singles Day or milking a bit more out of your Black Friday and getting that a bit earlier, your account managers will be more than happy to run you through that too. So we're getting to the actionable bits, the bits that you've all really been waiting for. What are we predicting in regards to the trends that are probably here to stay? I'll hand it over to Calum for the first one that we've highlighted.
Yeah, so as we've talked throughout the webinar, the whole trend of rebudgeting travel and entertainment spend is going to be massive for whatever industry you're in. There's certainly a share of wallet out there, and we don't know how long these lockdowns are going to last, but every month that passes where we can't travel out or we can't visit bars, restaurants, theatre, etc., that budget is going to be spent in other industries. So we're going to look at which industries are really going to benefit from that, and I think that's something that all clients can take on board.
Another one, I think, so we've mentioned here, brands based level of e-commerce sales are going to continue to grow. I think it's safe to say if you're in e-commerce now, you probably made the right decision when it comes to any of your investments or business related decisions. The acceleration of which is going to depend on how people are marketing those, whether they're successfully carving out their niche, and how they're interacting with various social channels, various paid channels, and making sure that their messaging is as clean as possible and they're finding their audience. Their audience isn't out there looking for them and not managing to be able to engage with them.
I think a big trend to look post-lockdown will be to see if once we come out of lockdowns, if there is a modest drop in e-commerce revenues and whether that spend goes back into the community and local independent stores.
One we've certainly doubled down on when it comes to sort of putting our money where our mouth is on-site search continuing to accelerate and being something that platforms really need to look at embracing and really need to look at optimizing. It's a key path to purchase for consumers, and more often than not, it goes overlooked completely, whether it's bad menus, whether it's bad layout. It's a point of contention now, which is beyond, I think it's beyond question. It's something that people really need to start taking seriously. Again, it's something we're doing here, and we'd be more than happy to speak with you about that at some point after this as well.
And if 2020 brought anything, it definitely brought a change in a consumer's decision making. There's heightened levels of anxiety everywhere, and consumers now have to meddle with a lot of different thoughts before making a purchase. So brands that can adapt to this and promote flexibility on site will see benefits to their conversion rates across the board.
Cool. So this last one is one that we went out on a limb for in a podcast. I think actually we sort of got our predictions a little bit wrong. I'll put a link in afterwards so you can see it and see us wrong live. Singles Day next year we believe is going to surpass Black Friday for the clothing and accessories industry. It's not going to be too tough for them to do, I don't think, 'cause I think there's plenty of other sort of verticals that tend to do well on Black Friday. For instance, if you're waiting for that pair of trainers, they're probably not going to be going into sale. So we tend to see a lot of people not waiting for those more niche items, but I think Singles Day is really going to be the one to watch next year.
Yeah, so as a recap, that was what happened in 2020, but what does the future of e-commerce like, and what's the point in looking back if we're not going to look forward? To keep it simple, we've outlined the two most critical ways to ride the wave of consumer behavior in 2021.
So what's the next? What's the first one?
So there's going to be a new evolution in search, almost Darwinian. As we've discussed, there's unprecedented growth as a revenue driver search was throughout 2020, and the chart on the right also shows that page views are consistently growing across the board. So there's going to be more traffic on websites, and more of that traffic will be clamoring to use search as their main way of purchasing within that brand. So with this being the case, anything less than an incredible optimized search function, which is super fast and adapts to everything that the consumer comes to expect, isn't going to be sufficient. Consumers now want to be able to search in seconds. They want to be able to use voice search like Siri or Alexa. They want to be able to snap pictures they've seen before or find visually similar products than ones they've seen in front of them. So things like speed, flexibility, and convenience within search functions are going to be the main reason or the main thing you can do to improve conversion and retention rates next year. And finally, brands are going to need to start to stretch like yoga instructors. As we've mentioned with consumers in 2020, there's been a lot of uncertainty, and it's fair to say that there's been a lot more anxiety within everyone and how we make those purchase decisions. So brands that can empathize with that and can adapt to those more concerned customers will succeed in 2021. If a consumer wants to know more about delivery information, whether they can collect in store or how long it will take to come, whether it's the return process, what is that, or is there a different way of breaking up purchases to ease with that kind of financial worry. If a brand can feed them all that information in one place, then that will really help to improve and ensure that traffic doesn't leave to competitors and converts within the site.
I think that about wraps us up. So thanks, Calum. If you did want to find out any more about optimizing your search capabilities or promoting any of that flexibility throughout your e-com platform, or your site specifically, we'd more than happy to speak to you after this. I'll put you in touch with one of our consultants, and we will be following up with some cheat sheets in regards to stats and things like that afterwards, so you've got them to hand. So thank you so much for listening at this point, and thanks, Calum, for putting all that together. There's a lot there. We'll be sharing these slides as well. But yeah, thanks for joining us, and thanks for making it right through to the end.
And just a congratulations, really, from me. You've lasted up until this point, and that was a hell of a lot of data and insights to go through. We try to cover the whole year, so if you have lasted to this point, then congratulations. We want to invite you to ask us any questions, anything that's burning on your mind. Josh and I are happy to kind of talk through that now.
Cool. Quite well, we've taken quite a lot of time there, actually, and we'll pick a few. I think Calum's going to get one or two out now, and we'll catch up personally with those we don't actually manage to get hold of today. Actually, those questions that we've got burning in there, either Calum will reach out, or we'll get a consultant to do. We'll go through it.
Yeah. So once again, thanks for lasting to the end there. So I'll try and pick out a couple of questions. So I've got one on here. Can we explain a bit more about how we can promote flexibility? Not too sure on what the promote flexibility means. Josh, you want to take this one?
For me, it'd be the big one is flexibility through payments. I think we've seen that crop up quite a lot the last couple of years, especially here. Especially when you see the guys like ZipPay and Klarna coming through. It just affords people who, especially on the high ticket items, I think this actually crosses over the question that Robin had earlier about how many people saw an uptick in the high ticket items across lockdown periods, especially the more luxurious ones. We've seen personally that really uptick through these flexible payment methods, especially the pay in threes. It just makes things simpler. People know where they are with things, especially if lockdown's going to sort of drag on a little bit. It's nice to sort of treat yourself, isn't it? I think we're starting to see that in the day. It might be one we dig out actually. If you can get the name of the person who asked that might, we're happy to pull that from TrendDesk and give them a shout about it actually.
Yep, sure. Yeah, we'll reach out to you separately after this.
I think just one more thing, it's messaging as well. I think when it comes to how you're getting your point across on site, doing it at the right time at key touch points. For instance, if somebody's going to leave, providing delivery dates. If someone's going to leave, look, let's get a newsletter sign up from you. Let's get in touch at some point when something's a bit more relevant to you, that type of thing.
Yep. Any other questions? We've got one here. Which categories are you expecting to be successful in 2021?
Probably a good one for you, that, Cal.
Yeah, I think what we saw in 2020 with such a big event changing the way we lived our lives, and there was a lot of categories like we talked at the start around gardening, sports, home and living, all seeing massive kind of uplift straight away. And I think some of you guys on the webinar said you saw that yourselves. Now, I think anything that fits into a consumer's psyche of self improvement is going to again do well next year. So I think the macro trend behind gardening and DIY and home improvements doing well was it one gave something people a purpose to do whilst in lockdown, and secondly it was give people a sense of kind of self-improvement, and all right, they're learning how to become a gardener or how to bake banana bread or you
Home
know
chefs.
how to build a wardrobe. So I think that can cover all industries, no matter what you're in, as long as you can promote a message of this is going to improve you as a person as well as a possession, then I think that'll work.
I think you've got to take seasonality into account, definitely, because no one's out in the garden right now, let's be honest. But I think where those retailers where that's not working for them right now can benefit is providing context. I think that's what a lot of our products do. They inspire purchases through providing a certain context. Say someone's landing on your gardening site now, they might be looking out the window, dull day, garden's flooded. I need to sort that out. I need to sort that out. Get a newsletter sign up from them. When they go to leave the site, just say, look, we know now's not the right time. Be honest. Look, you know no one's out in the garden at the minute. Just say, we'll take a newsletter from you. When start things looking like they're going to pick up, we'll get in touch and we'll let you know what we've got. I think we're really starting to see people appreciate that through these lockdowns. I think that I know we talked about empathy on the last webinar, but actually treating someone like a human and sort of looking beyond the numbers a little bit. I know it's easy for us to say coming from a stat desk, talking about looking beyond the numbers, but I think it's important. You've got to do it.
And in terms of getting that message across, what would be a good way in terms of getting people to sign up or communicating them in a non-hard sales kind of way?
I think the key takeaway straight away, like the quick fix, is to get on site and just make sure all your messaging is soft enough. You're taking into account the current situation we're in. We know you've got something to sell and you've got numbers to hit yourself, but you've just got to rein it in a little bit and take those people into consideration. From like personally speaking, on a sort of Salesfire level, we have quite a lot of clients who have quite complex sort of setups of overlays, running a sort of abandoned basket emails through our dashboard. You can sort of, a bit of a shameless plug, but setting up triggered overlays and triggered messaging based on exactly how a customer's moved through the site. So how long they've spent, what they've looked at, when they're leaving. And by sort of putting that together and looking at strategy, you can sort of work out why they're leaving from that, instead of us just sort of giving you the marketing spiel and not giving you anything you can really take away from it. I think you've got to look at the what's happening, and then you can sort of work out the why. And I think that's when you're really gonna start setting things alight, I think, at this point.
And I think the key thing from that is using consumer behavior to focus that. So use that data, use the consumer behavior. Don't just throw pop-ups in front of people who are landing on your site. But if they're kind of committing that action, that shows that they might be looking for more information. They're going through lots of pages, they're on blog pages or information pages, then that's the kind of behavior that you want to then, push them in the right direction. It's not a kind of blanket approach, it's more behavioral based.
And I think data can be daunting as well. I mean, for me, especially, a spreadsheet with the thousands of pages, the type of thing you look at, Calum, it just looks like wingdings to me. Like I really struggle with it. But if you sort of take it into small chunks and look at how many people left today, what page they left from, and just do it step at a time, you will get there with it eventually. You don't have to be a whiz with it to sort of look and use your common sense, really, just to see, hang on, what's here, why is that there, and what are people doing when you're on it. But again, we have strategists here that are happy to help from top to bottom with that type of thing as well.
Definitely, we have people here that can take a
large plug number 2
data amount that looks like windings to some people to looking like Mozart's symphony.
But you can do it yourself. You can take those first steps yourself, and then maybe reach out to someone like us after that.
And I just want to answer one more question that has popped up in the chat, which I think is really interesting. So Gabby has messaged, I think, from Robin. I'm interested in finding out how the lockdowns and changes throughout the year have affected considered purchases, such as premium fashion products like watches and jewelry.
I think I tried to touch on this earlier when we were talking about the flexibility of payments. Have you seen any? What were the spikes looking like when you've been looking at the data? Has there been anything that sort of stood out to you when it comes to sort of high ticket stuff?
Well, it's not directly causal, but it's if you put 2 and 2 together, you can see on a lot of these considered purchase kind of or larger big ticket industries and websites. So things like expensive electronics, or as you say, Robin, like expensive jewelry that you don't just go on and add to basket and check out like you would on Amazon.
You're coming back
a bit more considered. The page views on those websites are much higher generally than the page views on kind of a smaller ticket items, which suggests that people are, like you say, considering the purchase more and considering more information when making that purchase.
This is where messaging is key throughout the process. You've got to be, obviously, someone's buying a Rolex, someone's buying a used Rolex, for instance, they're coming back 2 or 3 times. It is what it is. But if you can get the messaging right to make sure they're coming back those 2 or 3 times, they're not coming back 4, 5, 6, 7 times, all of a sudden that starts making a big difference. And you start, again, it's all about little wins for me. And call them little wins, call them quick fixes, call what you like. But eventually you get to a point. It's how we sort of put the system together. We have a number of features that on their own, that some of them do great numbers on their own, don't get me wrong. But when you start amalgamating that and you start accumulating those differences, that's when things start spinning around for you, I think.
Yeah, and from a kind of a TrendDesk background, so looking at the data, it's more about combining that flexibility of messaging with consistency of messaging. So it's like having on many different parts of the website, whether it be within your search bar, within product pages, within category pages, within help and article pages, that same consistent message. How can you purchase this item? What are the delivery processes? What are the return functions? And just really trying to remove that anxiety within the purchase.
Yeah.
And like someone said here, hold people's hands. But
it's true, yeah. It's a great one, holding people's hands. What you got to do is take away every other little bit of noise you've got to make sure they're making a decision based on, do they want this, do they not want it. You don't want them worrying about delivery times, you don't want them worrying about quality of service, you don't want them worrying about any of those things. You got to take all of it away and just strip that back and leave them with the decision, do they want that? And then you've done that through your product. You've got them there at that point. You've just got to strip away every little objection that they might have. We've got my producer's nipped up on Zoom here and he's telling me to wrap it up quite quickly. I think we've overrun. But hopefully that was of some use to you guys. But any questions we haven't hit, we will get back to you in some form today, either personally or we'll get one of the guys to do it.
Oh, can I just interject with one tiny thing? We're going to be sending out a bit of a 2021 Are You Ready checklist, which outlines some of the things we're talking about, and really you can have that and look, are you actually ready for 2021? So that will come as well as the slides for anyone who wants kind of a recap.
Yeah, plus if you want to go to salesfire.co.uk, bear with me, let me just get the URL. I always wonder whether it's got a dash in it.
/TrendDesk.
/trend-desk. You'll be able to pull all that yourself as well. So all the data we're looking at and what we're working through, you guys can have full access to. It doesn't require any paywalls or anything like that. Right? I'm being told to wrap it up. We're going for it. Thanks again, guys. Right. We'll send that all out to you.
Speak to you soon. Bye.